Welcome to Mystery Sleep. Tonight, we'll journey through the complete story of ancient Egypt, from the first Pharaoh to the legendary Cleopatra. So, relax, take a slow breath, and let history guide you into a peaceful night's sleep. Long before the pyramids touched the sky, long before the names of Ramesses, Tutankhamun, and Cleopatra were written into history, there was a river that quietly shaped the destiny of an entire civilization: the Nile. Every year, its waters traveled thousands of kilometers through the heart of Africa before reaching the Mediterranean Sea. Along its banks, life flourished in a way that seemed almost miraculous. Beyond the river stretched vast deserts of sand and stone. But beside the Nile, the land turned green. Crops grew, birds gathered in the reeds, fish filled the calm waters. Families built homes from mud bricks and watched the seasons pass with quiet patience. To the people who lived here thousands of years ago, the Nile was not simply a river. It was a gift. Every summer, the floods arrived almost as if guided by an invisible clock. When the water slowly retreated, they left behind a layer of rich black soil. That fertile earth allowed wheat, barley, onions, beans, and flax to grow in abundance. Harvest after harvest, generation after generation, the river continued to provide. As the first light of dawn spread across the valley, fishermen gently pushed wooden boats into the still water. Farmers carried simple wooden tools across their fields, while birds circled overhead. Children played among tall papyrus plants as elders shared stories of the river, the stars, and the spirits they believed watched over the land. Life moved slowly, peacefully. The rhythm of every village followed the rhythm of the Nile. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. Small farming communities slowly expanded into larger settlements. Families traded pottery, woven baskets, carved stone tools, grain, and dried fish with neighboring villages. Boats traveled farther each season, carrying not only goods, but also new ideas. Without realizing it, these early communities were preparing the foundation for one of the greatest civilizations in human history. As the population grew, local leaders emerged. Some governed only a few villages. Others controlled long stretches of the river. Over many generations, two powerful kingdoms developed. To the north, where the Nile divided into many branches before reaching the Mediterranean Sea, lay Lower Egypt. Far to the south, where the river flowed between narrow valleys and towering cliffs, lay Upper Egypt. Although they shared the same river, the two kingdoms developed their own symbols, traditions, and rulers. Sometimes they traded peacefully. Sometimes they competed for influence. Neither kingdom expected that everything would soon change. Around 3100 BCE, a powerful ruler from Upper Egypt began a campaign that would transform the history of the Nile forever. His name is remembered today as Narmer. Many historians believe Narmer succeeded in uniting Upper and Lower Egypt into a single kingdom, creating what we now recognize as ancient Egypt. One remarkable artifact, known today as the Narmer palette, appears to celebrate this historic moment. It shows the king wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt on one side and the red crown of Lower Egypt on the other, symbols that would later be combined into the famous double crown worn by Egyptian pharaohs. Whether every detail happened exactly as later generations described, historians agree on one extraordinary fact: a united kingdom had been born. And with that union came a new idea. The Pharaoh. The ruler of Egypt was not viewed merely as a king. He was believed to be responsible for preserving harmony throughout the land. Ancient Egyptians called this sacred balance Ma'at, a principle of truth, justice, order, and stability. As long as Ma'at was maintained, the Nile would continue to flood, crops would grow, and the kingdom would prosper. It was a belief that shaped every part of Egyptian life: religion, government, architecture, even the smallest daily routines. No one living along the peaceful banks of the Nile could have imagined that their civilization would one day build monuments so extraordinary that they would still stand thousands of years later. The age of the Great Pyramids had not yet begun, but the first chapter of ancient Egypt had quietly opened along the timeless waters of the Nile. The new kingdom did not appear overnight. Although Narmer's unification marked the beginning of ancient Egypt's long history, building a nation would take generations of careful planning, cooperation, and vision. The Nile connected thousands of people living many days apart by boat. Farmers, fishermen, craftsmen, traders, priests, and officials all depended upon one another. Gradually, the first Egyptian government began to take shape. Messengers carried important news along the river. Officials measured farmland after each annual flood. Scribes carefully recorded harvests, trade, and taxes using delicate hieroglyphic writing on sheets of papyrus. In a world where few people could read or write, scribes held a position of great respect. Their steady hands preserved the memory of kings, recorded religious ceremonies, and kept the kingdom organized. To become a scribe required years of patient learning. Young students practiced the same symbols again and again until every line was perfect. Mistakes were carefully corrected. Discipline was admired. Knowledge became one of Egypt's greatest treasures. As villages expanded into thriving towns, skilled craftsmen discovered new ways to shape stone, carve wood, cast copper, and create beautiful jewelry from gold and precious stones gathered from distant lands. Potters produced elegant jars that stored grain, oil, and water. Weavers transformed flax into fine linen clothing that remained comfortable beneath the warm Egyptian sun. Every profession played an important role. Every worker contributed to the growing strength of the kingdom. Life along the Nile followed a peaceful rhythm that repeated every year. First came the season of flooding. The rising waters covered the fields, bringing fresh, fertile soil from far to the south. Then came the growing season. Farmers carefully planted their crops while watching the skies and tending irrigation channels that carried water across the fields. Finally came the harvest. Families gathered together to collect wheat and barley before storing it safely for the months ahead. This dependable cycle gave Egypt something that many ancient civilizations lacked: stability. With reliable harvests came growing populations. With growing populations came larger cities. And with larger cities came ambitious dreams. The early pharaohs understood that great monuments could unite the kingdom while honoring both the gods and their own legacy. At first, royal tombs were simple rectangular structures built from sun-dried mud bricks. These tombs, known today as mastabas, protected the bodies of kings and nobles after death. Ancient Egyptians believed that death was not the end of existence. Instead, they believed life continued in another world. To prepare for that eternal journey, food, clothing, jewelry, furniture, and treasured possessions were placed inside the tomb. Everything a person might need was carefully arranged. The body itself was treated with great respect because Egyptians believed the soul would continue to recognize its earthly home. These early beliefs would eventually inspire one of history's most remarkable traditions: the art of preserving the dead. But that practice had not yet fully developed. Instead, nature itself offered an unexpected lesson. In the hot desert sand beyond the fertile Nile Valley, bodies buried in shallow graves often dried naturally beneath the intense heat. Years later, when graves were reopened, families sometimes found that the bodies had remained surprisingly well preserved. These discoveries may have inspired later generations to search for ways to protect the body even more carefully. Meanwhile, religion continued to shape every aspect of Egyptian life. The sun rose every morning with dependable certainty. The Nile flooded each year. The stars crossed the night sky in perfect order. To the people of ancient Egypt, this harmony reflected the work of powerful gods watching over the world. Ra, the great sun god, traveled across the heavens each day. At night, he was believed to journey through the mysterious underworld before rising once again at dawn.
Watching the sunrise became a daily reminder that life always returned, that order would overcome chaos, that hope would follow darkness. Perhaps this simple belief helped generations of Egyptians face both the joys and sorrows of life with remarkable confidence. As evening settles once more across the Nile, golden light dances upon the quiet water. Boats slowly return to shore. Farmers finish their work. Children gather beside their families as cooking fires begin to glow beneath the deepening blue sky. No one yet knows that within only a few generations, a brilliant royal architect will imagine a monument unlike anything the world has ever seen. A monument that will forever change the history of architecture. And with it, the age of the pyramids will finally begin. Among the many young officials serving the royal court, one man would eventually change the course of history. His name was Imhotep. Unlike the famous pharaohs whose names echoed through the centuries, Imhotep was not born into a royal family. He was a gifted scholar, architect, engineer, physician, and trusted advisor to Pharaoh Djoser, the ruler of Egypt's third dynasty. Thousands of years later, historians would still speak his name with admiration. Around 2670 BCE, Pharaoh Djoser dreamed of building a tomb unlike anything Egypt had ever seen. For generations, kings had been buried beneath simple mastabas, low, rectangular structures made from mud brick. They served their purpose well, but Djoser desired something greater, something that would honor both the gods and the eternal power of the pharaoh. Imhotep began to imagine an extraordinary idea. Instead of building one mastaba, why not build several, each one smaller than the one beneath it, stacked carefully toward the heavens? It was a simple idea, yet it would forever transform architecture. Workers first prepared a massive stone foundation upon the desert plateau of Saqqara, just south of the future city of Memphis. Unlike earlier royal tombs, this monument would not be built from mud brick. It would be built almost entirely from carefully cut limestone. For the first time in history, A monument of this scale would rely on stone as its primary material. It was a bold decision. Stone was stronger, more beautiful, and far more difficult to shape. Thousands of skilled laborers gathered at the construction site. Stonecutters carefully carved enormous limestone blocks from nearby quarries. Teams of workers pulled the heavy stones across the desert using large wooden sledges. Modern archaeological experiments suggest that dampening the sand in front of the sledges may have reduced friction, allowing massive blocks to slide more easily across the ground. The work required patience, organization, and remarkable teamwork. Every stone had its place. Every measurement mattered. As the monument slowly rose above the desert, people living along the Nile witnessed something they had never seen before. A giant staircase of stone reaching toward the sky. Today we know it as the Step Pyramid of Djoser. Standing more than 60 meters high, it became the tallest structure ever created by human hands. Its smooth limestone reflected the brilliant Egyptian sunlight, making the monument visible from great distances across the surrounding desert. But the pyramid itself was only one part of an enormous sacred complex. High walls surrounded temples, courtyards, ceremonial pathways, and underground passages extending deep beneath the earth. The entire complex covered an area larger than many modern city blocks. Everything had been carefully designed, not simply as a tomb, but as a place where the pharaoh could continue his eternal journey after death. Ancient Egyptians believed that death marked the beginning of another existence. The soul would continue its voyage into the afterlife. To prepare for that journey, priests performed sacred rituals, offerings were made, and the tomb was filled with objects intended to serve the king forever. Food, furniture, jewelry, statues, even symbolic servants carved from stone. Each item reflected a profound belief that life continued beyond the visible world. As the step pyramid rose higher with each passing season, its success inspired new ambitions. If one king could build a pyramid of stone, perhaps future kings could build monuments even greater. No one standing beneath the bright Egyptian sun could yet imagine what was coming next. Because beyond the horizon, a new generation of builders was already preparing to create structures so immense that they would stand among the greatest achievements in human history. The age of the Great Pyramids was drawing ever closer. The step pyramid stood as a symbol of a new age. For the first time, Egypt had proven that stone could reach toward the heavens. Its success inspired every ruler who followed. Among them was a young king named Sneferu. Historians remember Sneferu not only as one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, but also as the man who transformed pyramid building from an ambitious experiment into a remarkable science. Unlike many rulers who built only a single royal monument, Sneferu refused to settle for one design. He wanted perfection. His first great project began at Medum. At first, it looked much like Djoser's step pyramid, rising in giant stone layers toward the sky. But during construction, the design changed. Builders attempted to transform the stepped sides into smooth, sloping faces. It was an ambitious idea, perhaps too ambitious. The foundation and outer layers struggled under the enormous weight. At some point, much of the outer structure collapsed. Even today, the Medum Pyramid appears almost like a lonely stone tower rising from the desert, silently reminding visitors that even great civilizations learned through failure.
But Sneferu did not give up. Far to the north, at Dashur, construction began once again. This pyramid would become one of the most fascinating monuments in Egypt. As workers carefully raised the limestone blocks higher and higher, engineers noticed something troubling. The steep angle placed enormous pressure upon the structure. If construction continued unchanged, the pyramid itself might become unstable. Rather than risking disaster, the builders made a remarkable decision. Halfway through construction, they reduced the angle of the upper section. The result was unlike any pyramid before or after. Its lower walls rose steeply. Its upper walls suddenly bent inward at a gentler angle. Today, it is known as the Bent Pyramid. Far from being a mistake, many archaeologists see it as evidence of something extraordinary. The ancient Egyptians were learning. They observed, they adapted, they improved. That willingness to solve difficult problems would soon lead to one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements. Not far from the Bent Pyramid, Sneferu ordered one final construction project. Everything his builders had learned would be applied here. The foundation was carefully prepared. The angle was calculated with greater precision. Each limestone block was placed with remarkable accuracy. When the work was complete, Egypt possessed its first true, smooth-sided pyramid. Today we know it as the Red Pyramid. Standing proudly against the desert sky, it represented generations of experience, careful planning, and relentless determination. For the first time, architects had achieved exactly what they had imagined. The smooth pyramid had become reality. Sneferu's reign changed far more than architecture. His engineers developed better methods for transporting stone. His administrators organized larger workforces. His craftsmen improved tools and construction techniques. Every lesson would be passed to the next generation. And among that next generation was a young prince. His name was Khufu. He watched what his father had accomplished,
He saw the success of the Red Pyramid. But in his mind, another dream was already taking shape. Not simply another pyramid, the greatest pyramid the world would ever see. A monument so enormous that thousands of years later, people from every corner of the earth would still stand before it in amazement. As evening settles across the quiet desert, the final rays of sunlight paint Sneferu's pyramids in shades of gold and crimson. The wind gently carries grains of sand across the ancient stones. The experiments are over. The lessons have been learned, and the stage is now set for the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The morning sun rose slowly above the eastern horizon, casting its first golden light across the limestone cliffs overlooking the Nile. Far to the north, on a rocky plateau that would one day become the most famous archaeological site on Earth, thousands of workers had already begun another day. This place was called Giza. Long before the first stone was laid, royal architects carefully studied the land. The plateau stood high above the fertile valley, safely protected from the annual floods of the Nile. Its solid limestone bedrock offered a stable foundation capable of supporting a monument unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. The young pharaoh Khufu had made his decision. His tomb would not simply honor his reign. It would become a symbol of Egypt itself. Construction began with remarkable precision. Surveyors stretched long measuring ropes across the plateau, carefully marking perfect right angles. Using simple but highly effective tools, they aligned the foundation almost exactly with the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. Even today, modern engineers continue to admire the astonishing accuracy they achieved more than 4,500 years ago. The first limestone blocks arrived from nearby quarries. Others traveled from much farther away. The finest white limestone casing stones came from Tura across the Nile. Massive granite blocks, some weighing more than 50 tons, were transported from Aswan, nearly 800 kilometers to the south. Moving such enormous stones required careful planning. During the annual Nile floods, boats carried heavy cargo downstream, while the high water allowed vessels to travel closer to the construction site. Once unloaded, teams of workers pulled the stones across prepared roads using large wooden sledges. Recent archaeological discoveries suggest that workers poured water onto the sand ahead of the sledges. The damp sand reduced friction, making it easier to move the enormous blocks across the desert. Day after day, season after season, the pyramid slowly grew. Contrary to old legends, historians have found no convincing evidence that the Great Pyramid was built by enslaved people. Excavations near Giza uncovered the remains of organized workers' villages, bakeries, kitchens, sleeping quarters, and even cemeteries where skilled laborers were buried with honor. These discoveries tell a different story.
Many of the builders appear to have been paid workers, craftsmen, engineers, quarrymen, sailors, and farmers who worked during the Nile's flood season, when their fields were temporarily underwater. Each person played a role. Stonecutters shaped the blocks. Surveyors checked every measurement. Boat crews transported materials. Cooks prepared thousands of meals every day. Doctors treated injuries. Scribes recorded supplies and organized labor. The Great Pyramid was not the work of one extraordinary man. It was the achievement of an entire civilization working together toward a single goal.
As each new layer was completed, the monument climbed steadily toward the heavens. Standing nearby, people must have watched in quiet amazement. Nothing so large had ever existed before. Its brilliant white limestone casing reflected the Egyptian sun so brightly that it could be seen from many kilometers away. To travelers approaching along the Nile, it must have appeared almost like a mountain of light rising from the edge of the desert. Yet despite all we have learned through archaeology, many questions remain unanswered. Exactly how were the highest stones lifted into place? What combination of ramps, levers, and human effort made such an enormous project possible? Researchers continue to debate these questions today. Several theories have been proposed. Some suggest long, straight ramps. Others believe spiral ramps surrounded the pyramid as it grew. Still others propose carefully designed internal ramps hidden within the structure during construction. No single explanation has been universally accepted,
And perhaps that is part of the Great Pyramid's enduring fascination. Even after centuries of study, it still keeps some of its greatest engineering secrets. As evening approaches once again, the sound of chisels gradually fades across the plateau. Workers gather beside small fires, sharing bread, onions, fish, and quiet conversation beneath a sky filled with stars. Above them rises the unfinished pyramid, layer after layer, reaching higher into the fading light. Its summit has not yet touched the sky, but with every passing season, that extraordinary moment draws closer. As the centuries passed, Egypt entered what historians now call the Middle Kingdom, a period remembered for stability, literature, and renewed prosperity. The scars left by earlier years of political division slowly began to heal. Pharaohs once again ruled from a position of strength. Canals were expanded. New farmland was cultivated. Trade routes reached farther into Africa and the Near East. For many ordinary Egyptians, life became more secure than it had been in generations. Along the Nile, mornings always began in familiar ways. Before sunrise, the air remained cool and quiet. Fishermen untied their boats from wooden docks. Farmers gathered simple tools before walking into the fields. Children carried baskets of bread, while mothers prepared meals from freshly ground grain. The smell of baking bread mixed with the scent of the river
It was a peaceful rhythm that had remained almost unchanged for thousands of years. Yet beyond Egypt's southern frontier, another powerful kingdom was growing. Nubia.
Located along the Upper Nile, Nubia was rich in gold, ivory, ebony, and valuable trade routes connecting Central Africa with Egypt.
For centuries, the two civilizations traded with one another. Sometimes they lived as trusted partners. Sometimes they became rivals. To protect Egypt's southern border, powerful fortresses were constructed along the Nile. Soldiers watched the river from high stone walls, while merchants passed through carefully guarded gates, carrying goods from distant lands. These forts were more than military outposts. They became thriving communities where cultures met, languages mixed, and merchants exchanged stories from places few Egyptians had ever seen. Meanwhile, far to the northeast, another challenge slowly approached. Groups of people from Western Asia gradually settled in the eastern Nile Delta. Some came peacefully as traders and craftsmen. Others arrived seeking farmland and opportunity. Over time, one of these groups gained increasing influence. History remembers them as the Hyksos.
Unlike earlier visitors, the Hyksos introduced technologies that transformed warfare.
They brought fast, horse-drawn chariots, powerful composite bows, improved bronze weapons, military techniques unfamiliar to Egypt. Eventually, the Hyksos established control over parts of northern Egypt. For the first time in centuries, native Egyptian rulers no longer controlled the entire kingdom. It was a difficult chapter in Egypt's long history, yet it would also become one of its greatest turning points. In the southern city of Thebes, Egyptian rulers quietly prepared to reclaim their homeland. Generation after generation refused to accept foreign rule forever. Among them rose determined leaders whose courage inspired an entire nation. The final struggle lasted many years. Battles were fought along the Nile. Fortresses changed hands. Armies marched across deserts beneath the blazing Egyptian sun. At last, around the middle of the 16th century BCE, the Hyksos were driven from Egypt. The kingdom stood united once again. But Egypt had changed. Its leaders had learned valuable lessons.
They understood that protecting the kingdom required more than defending its borders. Egypt would now become a great military power. Its armies expanded. Its diplomacy reached distant kingdoms. Its influence spread farther than ever before. Historians call this remarkable era the New Kingdom. It would become the golden age of ancient Egypt. Some of the greatest temples would be built. Some of the most famous pharaohs would rule. And names that still capture the imagination today
would soon appear in history. Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Seti, Ramesses the Great. Their stories were waiting just beyond the horizon. As the sun slowly disappears behind the western desert, the waters of the Nile glow with deep shades of gold and crimson. The river continues its timeless journey toward the sea, just as it always has. Empires may rise, kings may pass away, but the Nile remembers them all. And with the coming of a new dawn, Egypt's greatest age is about to begin.
The new kingdom began with a sense of hope, unlike anything Egypt had experienced for generations. The kingdom was united once again. Its borders were secure. Its armies were stronger than ever before. And along the banks of the Nile, a new generation looked toward the future with confidence. The city of Thebes became the beating heart of this remarkable age. Its temples grew larger each year. Priests filled vast courtyards with music, incense, and prayer. Merchants from distant lands arrived carrying cedar wood from Lebanon, precious lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, incense from Arabia, and rare animals from the African interior. Egypt had become one of the wealthiest kingdoms on earth. Among the rulers of this extraordinary era, one name quietly rose above the others: Hatshepsut. Unlike most pharaohs before her, Hatshepsut was a woman. At first, she ruled as regent for her young stepson, Thutmose III. But as the years passed, she assumed the full title of Pharaoh. Rather than hiding her authority, she embraced it completely. Ancient statues portrayed her wearing the royal headdress. Some even showed her with the ceremonial false beard traditionally worn by male kings. It was not an attempt to disguise herself. It was a symbol of the office she held. For the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh represented the stability of the kingdom itself, regardless of whether that ruler was a man or a woman. Hatshepsut chose peace over conquest. Instead of sending armies across distant lands, she invested in trade, architecture, and prosperity. One of her greatest achievements was an ambitious trading expedition to the mysterious land of Punt. Although historians continue to debate its exact location, many believe Punt lay somewhere along the Horn of Africa. The expedition returned with remarkable treasures: gold, ebony, ivory, exotic animals, rare perfumes, and living myrrh trees, carefully transported back to Egypt and planted near her magnificent temples. It was one of the earliest recorded international trade missions in history. Meanwhile, construction flourished across the kingdom. Among Hatshepsut's greatest monuments stood her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. Nestled against towering limestone cliffs on the western bank of the Nile, its elegant terraces
seemed to rise naturally from the surrounding landscape. Even today, many architects consider it one of the most beautiful buildings of the ancient world. Its graceful symmetry reflected a civilization that valued harmony as much as power. Artists carefully covered its walls with colorful reliefs showing voyages to Punt, religious ceremonies, and scenes of daily life. These carvings continue to help historians understand a world that existed more than 3,000 years ago. Yet, history rarely remains still.
After Hatshepsut's reign came one of Egypt's greatest military leaders,
Thutmose III, sometimes called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt by modern historians because of his many successful campaigns. Thutmose III expanded Egypt's influence farther than ever before. His armies marched into Syria and Canaan. Fortresses surrendered. Trade routes came under Egyptian protection. Instead of destroying conquered cities, Egypt often allowed local rulers to remain in power as long as they remained loyal to the pharaoh. This strategy strengthened both commerce and diplomacy throughout the region. As wealth flowed into Egypt, magnificent temples continued to rise along the Nile. The Temple of Karnak became one of the largest religious complexes ever built. Generation after generation of pharaohs added new halls, towering obelisks, sacred lakes, and enormous stone columns. Walking through Karnak must have been breathtaking.
towering pillars stretched high above visitors like a forest of carved stone. Every surface told a story. Victories, festivals, prayers, the names of kings, the gifts offered to the gods. As evening falls over Thebes, the setting sun bathes Karnak in warm shades of gold. Priests light rows of oil lamps beneath towering columns. The scent of incense drifts gently through the quiet air. Egypt stands at the height of its power. Its armies are respected. Its temples are magnificent. Its people believe their kingdom will last forever. But history often changes when no one expects it. Soon, a young pharaoh will challenge thousands of years of religious tradition. His decisions will transform Egypt in ways no ruler had ever dared to imagine. And the consequences will echo through history for centuries to come. As the years passed, Egypt stood at the height of its greatness. Its temples stretched toward the heavens. Its armies protected an empire that reached far beyond the Nile. Its wealth flowed from every direction. To many, it seemed that nothing could ever disturb the balance of this ancient kingdom. Then, around 1353 BCE, a young prince ascended the throne. His name was Amenhotep IV. At first, his reign appeared much like those of the pharaohs before him. The great temples remained busy. Priests continued their daily rituals.
The mighty god Amun was worshipped across the land. But beneath the surface, the young pharaoh had begun to see the world differently. Over time, he became devoted to a single divine power, the Aten. Represented by the radiant disk of the sun, the Aten had long been recognized in Egyptian religion. Yet, Amenhotep believed this divine force deserved a place above all other gods. His beliefs became stronger with each passing year.
As the years passed, Egypt stood at the height of its greatness. Its temples stretched toward the heavens. Its armies protected an empire that reached far beyond the Nile. Its wealth flowed from every direction. To many, it seemed that nothing could ever disturb the balance of this ancient kingdom. Then, around 1353 BCE, a young prince ascended the throne. His name was Amenhotep IV. At first, his reign appeared much like those of the pharaohs before him. The great temples remained busy. Priests continued their daily rituals. The mighty god Amen was worshipped across the land. But beneath the surface, the young pharaoh had begun to see the world differently. Over time, he became devoted to a single divine power, the Aten. Represented by the radiant disk of the sun, the Aten had long been recognized in Egyptian religion. Yet Amenhotep believed this divine force deserved a place above all other gods. His beliefs became stronger with each passing year. The pharaoh and his queen, Nefertiti, were depicted embracing their daughters beneath the warm light of the Aten. It was one of the most unusual artistic revolutions in Egyptian history. To support his new vision, Akhenaten built an entirely new capital city, Akhenaten, today known as Amarna. Constructed upon open desert land between Memphis and Thebes, the city rose with astonishing speed. Wide avenues crossed elegant neighborhoods. Royal palaces overlooked peaceful gardens. Open-air temples welcomed the morning sun. For a brief moment, Akhenaten became the center of Egypt's political and religious life. Yet, not everyone accepted these sweeping changes. Many ordinary Egyptians quietly continued honoring the traditional gods they had worshipped for generations. The powerful priests of Amun lost influence, but never lost their memories. Even some government officials wondered whether abandoning long-established traditions might weaken the kingdom itself. Beyond Egypt's borders, foreign rulers sent messages requesting military assistance as rival kingdoms grew more aggressive. Some historians believe Akhenaten devoted so much attention to religious reform that foreign affairs received less attention than they once had. The true extent of this remains debated. What is certain is that after Akhenaten's death, events moved quickly. The magnificent city of Akhenaten was gradually abandoned.
Many of its temples fell silent. The old gods returned. The names of Amun, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and countless others once again echoed through Egypt. Future pharaohs even attempted to erase Akhenaten's memory from many monuments. His statues were broken, his inscriptions removed. His city slowly disappeared beneath the desert sands. Yet history has a remarkable way of preserving forgotten stories. Thousands of years later, archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Amarna. They revealed a city frozen in time.
Homes, workshops, palaces, letters written on clay tablets. Every discovery offered another glimpse into one of the most extraordinary chapters in Egyptian history. As twilight settles over the empty streets of ancient Amarna, warm desert winds carry grains of sand through abandoned courtyards where children once played beneath the Egyptian sun. Silence has returned, but Egypt's story continues. For soon, a young king, whose tomb would remain hidden for more than 3,000 years, will inherit the throne. His name will become one of the most famous in all of history. Tutankhamun. When the young king came to the throne, Egypt was still recovering from one of the most unusual periods in its long history. The temples of the old gods had only recently begun to reopen. Many priests had returned to their sacred duties. The great city of Akhenaten was already starting to fade into silence. The new pharaoh was only a child. His name was Tutankhamun. He was perhaps no more than 8 or 9 years old when he inherited one of the world's greatest kingdoms. Because of his age, experienced advisors guided many of the kingdom's decisions. They understood that Egypt longed for stability. Gradually, the young king's court began restoring the traditions that had shaped Egypt for centuries. One of the most symbolic changes came with his name. Tutankhaten became Tutankhamun. The new name honored the god Amun once again, signaling that Egypt had returned to its ancient beliefs. Across the Nile Valley, temples reopened. Priests repaired damaged shrines. Sacred festivals returned to towns and villages. For ordinary Egyptians, familiar rituals once again filled daily life. The kingdom slowly found its balance. Although Tutankhamun ruled for only a short time, artists produced some of the most beautiful treasures ever created during his reign. Goldsmiths shaped delicate necklaces. Craftsmen carved elegant furniture from ebony and ivory. Master sculptors decorated royal shrines with extraordinary attention to detail. Every object reflected remarkable skill. Every surface displayed incredible beauty. Then, quite unexpectedly, the young pharaoh died.
The exact cause remains uncertain. Modern scientific studies have suggested several possibilities, including illness, infection following a serious leg injury, or complications related to inherited health conditions within the royal family. No single explanation has been proven beyond doubt. His death brought sadness to the royal court, yet few could have imagined that this young ruler, whose reign lasted less than a decade, would one day become the most famous pharaoh in history.
His tomb was prepared quickly in the Valley of the Kings. Unlike the enormous pyramids built more than 1,000 years earlier, New Kingdom pharaohs were buried deep within hidden tombs, carved into the rocky cliffs west of the Nile. The hope was simple: protect the royal treasures from thieves. For centuries, many royal tombs had been robbed. Hidden valleys offered greater security. Tutankhamun's burial chamber was filled with extraordinary objects intended to accompany him into eternity. Golden chariots, beautiful furniture, ceremonial weapons, jewelry of breathtaking craftsmanship, musical instruments, food, wine, fine linen, sacred statues, and at the center of it all rested one of history's greatest masterpieces, a magnificent golden funerary mask, crafted from solid gold and decorated with precious stones and colored glass. It portrayed the young king with remarkable serenity. His calm expression seemed untouched by time. The tomb was sealed. Workers carefully closed the entrance. The desert slowly reclaimed the valley. Generations passed. Dynasties rose and fell. Empires conquered Egypt. The memory of the young king gradually disappeared. Even the location of his tomb was forgotten. More than 3,000 years later, in November of 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter uncovered a hidden staircase beneath the sands of the Valley of the Kings. Carefully clearing the entrance, he reached a sealed doorway. Behind it lay another passage. Finally, Carter peered through a small opening into the darkness beyond. When asked if he could see anything, he famously replied, "Yes, wonderful things." Inside rested one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever made. Unlike many royal tombs that had been heavily robbed in ancient times, Tutankhamun's burial chamber remained astonishingly intact. Thousands of objects filled the rooms exactly as they had been placed more than 30 centuries earlier. The discovery captured the imagination of the entire world. Newspapers across continents reported every detail. Museums displayed magnificent treasures. For millions of people, Tutankhamun became the face of ancient Egypt itself. Legends soon followed. Stories spread about a mysterious curse upon those who disturbed the pharaoh's resting place. Although these tales became popular in books and films, historians have found no convincing evidence that a supernatural curse claimed the lives of those involved. The true story is already remarkable enough. A forgotten king, a hidden tomb, a discovery that forever transformed our understanding of ancient Egypt. As night falls over the Valley of the Kings, the limestone cliffs glow beneath countless stars. A gentle desert wind whispers through the silent valley. The golden mask of the young pharaoh now rests safely within a museum, admired by visitors from around the world. Yet Egypt's greatest ruler has still not appeared. Far to the south, a warrior king is preparing to ascend the throne. His monuments will dwarf almost everything built before him. His victories will be carved upon temple walls across the kingdom, and history will remember him simply as Ramesses the Great.
The passing of Tutankhamun marked the end of one chapter in Egypt's remarkable story. But the kingdom itself continued to grow stronger. Several rulers guided the nation through years of rebuilding and stability. Then, around 1279 BCE, a new pharaoh ascended the throne. His name was Ramesses II. History would remember him by another title, Ramesses the Great. He ruled Egypt for more than 66 years, longer than almost any other pharaoh of the new kingdom. Entire generations were born, grew old, and passed away knowing only one king. For many Egyptians, Ramesses seemed almost eternal. From the very beginning of his reign, he dreamed on a grand scale. He wanted Egypt to be admired not only for its wealth, but for monuments so magnificent that future generations would never forget his name. Across the Nile Valley, thousands of craftsmen, engineers, sculptors, and laborers once again gathered to begin extraordinary construction projects. Massive temples rose from the desert. Towering obelisks reached toward the sky. Gigantic statues carved from solid stone stood watch over sacred entrances.
Wherever travelers journeyed through Egypt, they encountered monuments celebrating the reign of Ramesses. One of his greatest achievements still stands beside the Nile at Abu Simbel. Carved directly into a mountainside in southern Egypt, the temple was unlike anything built before. 4 colossal seated statues of Ramesses guarded its entrance. Each towered more than 20 meters high. Their calm faces gazed across the desert as though watching the endless passage of time itself. Inside, long halls stretched deep into the mountain. Every wall displayed beautifully carved scenes of victories, religious ceremonies, and offerings to the gods. Perhaps the most remarkable feature of the temple was hidden within its design. Twice each year, around the changing seasons, the rising sun traveled through the entrance and illuminated
the inner sanctuary. Its golden light reached the statues of the principal gods and the deified Ramesses with astonishing precision. Even after more than 3,000 years, this alignment continues to inspire architects and historians alike. Yet, Ramesses was remembered not only as a builder,
he was also a warrior. During his reign, Egypt's greatest rival was the Hittite Empire, whose influence stretched across much of Anatolia and northern Syria. Tension between these two great powers eventually led to one of the most famous battles of the ancient world, the Battle of Kadesh. Around 1274 BCE, enormous armies met near the city of Kadesh. Thousands of infantry advanced across the plains. Hundreds of horse-drawn chariots raced through clouds of dust beneath the blazing sun. The battle was fierce, confusing, and unlike many ancient victories carved upon temple walls, the historical outcome appears far more balanced. Egyptian inscriptions celebrated Ramses as the triumphant hero. Hittite records presented a different perspective. Modern historians generally believe neither side achieved a decisive victory. Instead, both kingdoms eventually recognized that endless war benefited no one. Years later, Egypt and the Hittites signed what is widely regarded as one of the world's earliest surviving international peace treaties. Copies of that remarkable agreement still survive today. It reminds us that even powerful civilizations sometimes discovered the value of peace after experiencing the terrible cost of war. Back in Egypt, daily life continued beneath the dependable rhythm of the Nile. Children learned to read and write in temple schools. Farmers harvested grain from fertile fields. Merchants sailed north toward the Mediterranean, carrying linen, papyrus, glass, gold, and fine pottery. Musicians filled temple courtyards with gentle melodies. Artists painted colorful scenes of gardens, birds, rivers, and family celebrations upon tomb walls, preserving moments of ordinary life alongside stories of kings. As the decades passed, Ramses grew old. His hair turned white. His family expanded across several generations. Many of his children would pass away before he did. Still, the great Pharaoh continued to appear at ceremonies, determined to demonstrate that Egypt remained strong. When he finally died after one of the longest reigns in Egyptian history, the kingdom mourned deeply. His body was carefully prepared by skilled embalmers, using traditions perfected over centuries. Wrapped in fine linen and protected by sacred prayers, Ramesses began the eternal journey that every pharaoh believed awaited beyond this life. his monuments remained behind, silent witnesses to an age of extraordinary confidence. Even today, travelers standing before the colossal statues of Abu Simbel often feel the same quiet sense of wonder experienced by those who first saw them more than 3,000 years ago. As another peaceful night settles across the Nile, the great temples glow softly beneath the moonlight. The reign of Ramesses has come to an end, but Egypt itself is beginning to change once again. Powerful neighbors are rising. New empires are appearing beyond its borders. The age of the mighty pharaohs is slowly drawing toward its final chapters. As the reign of Ramesses the Great faded into history, Egypt remained magnificent. But the world beyond its borders was changing. New kingdoms were rising. Powerful empires expanded across the Near East. Trade routes shifted. Climate changed in some regions. And the balance of power that had favored Egypt for centuries slowly began to weaken. The mighty pharaohs who followed Ramesses struggled to maintain the same level of authority. Although temples continued to function and the Nile still brought life to the fertile valley each year, signs of decline gradually appeared. Foreign invasions became more frequent. Local officials gained greater independence. Royal resources became increasingly strained. One of the greatest challenges arrived from a mysterious group remembered by historians as the Sea Peoples. Around the late 13th and early 12th centuries BCE, these seafaring warriors appeared across the eastern Mediterranean, attacking coastal cities and disrupting long-established trade networks. Entire civilizations collapsed during this turbulent era. The once powerful Hittite Empire disappeared. Many great Bronze Age cities were abandoned. Egypt itself faced enormous pressure. Under Pharaoh Ramesses III, Egyptian armies fought desperately to defend both the Nile Delta and the Mediterranean coast. Ancient temple reliefs show fierce naval battles in which Egyptian archers fired arrows from ships while enemy vessels became trapped among carefully planned defenses. Although Egypt successfully resisted these invasions, victory came at a high cost. The kingdom survived, but it emerged weaker than before. Over the following centuries, Egypt gradually lost much of its influence beyond the Nile Valley. Regional governors became more powerful. Priests controlled vast temple estates. Different parts of the country were sometimes ruled by separate leaders at the same time. The unity that had once made Egypt so strong became increasingly difficult to preserve. Yet, despite political change, everyday life along the Nile continued with remarkable resilience. Farmers still welcomed the annual flood. Children still learned to read hieroglyphs from experienced scribes.
Craftsmen continued carving statues, weaving fine linen, and creating jewelry of extraordinary beauty. Religious festivals still filled temple courtyards with music, incense, and celebration. The civilization itself remained alive, even as its political power slowly declined. Eventually, powerful foreign empires arrived. The Assyrians marched into Egypt. Later came the Persians. Each conquest introduced new rulers, new administrators, and new challenges. Yet something remarkable happened. Rather than disappearing, Egyptian culture endured. Foreign kings often adopted Egyptian traditions. They respected ancient temples. They presented themselves as legitimate pharaohs. The civilization's identity proved stronger than the armies that conquered it. Then, in 332 BCE, another extraordinary figure entered Egypt, a young Macedonian king named Alexander. History remembers him as Alexander the Great. Unlike many conquerors before him, Alexander was welcomed by many Egyptians as a liberator after Persian rule. He visited sacred temples, honored Egyptian customs, and was declared pharaoh according to ancient tradition.
Before leaving Egypt to continue his campaigns, he founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria.
Built beside the sea, the city quickly became one of the greatest centers of learning, science, and culture in the ancient world. Its famous Library of Alexandria would eventually collect hundreds of thousands of scrolls from across the known world. Scholars, mathematicians, philosophers, and astronomers traveled there to exchange ideas that would shape civilization for centuries. The ancient kingdom beside the Nile had entered a new chapter. The age of the native pharaohs was ending, but Egypt's influence upon the world was far from over. As the warm evening breeze drifts across the quiet waters of the Nile, the lights of Alexandria begin to glow beneath the stars. Ancient traditions meet new ideas. Old temples stand beside growing cities. The story of Egypt is preparing for its final great ruler, a queen whose name would become known across every continent. Her intelligence, diplomacy, and determination would make her one of the most famous women in all of history. Her name was Cleopatra.
By the time Cleopatra was born, ancient Egypt had already stood for nearly 3,000 years.
Its pyramids were ancient, even to the people who lived during her lifetime. The great pharaohs had become legends. Their temples still stood proudly along the Nile. But Egypt itself was no longer ruled by native Egyptian kings. Instead, the country was governed by the Ptolemaic dynasty. The dynasty had begun after the death of Alexander the Great, when one of his trusted generals, Ptolemy I, became ruler of Egypt. Although the Ptolemies were Greek by origin, they embraced many Egyptian traditions. They ruled as pharaohs. They honored the ancient temples. They supported the priests. And from their magnificent capital at Alexandria, they governed one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the Mediterranean. Into this remarkable world, around 69 BCE, Cleopatra VII was born. Unlike many members of her family, Cleopatra possessed an extraordinary gift. She loved learning. She studied mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, medicine, diplomacy, and history.
Most remarkably, she learned to speak several languages. Ancient writers claimed she could converse fluently with people from many different lands without the need for translators. She was also one of the very few rulers of the Ptolemaic dynasty believed to have learned the Egyptian language itself. This allowed her to communicate directly with her people in ways many of her ancestors never had. When Cleopatra became queen, Egypt faced enormous challenges. To the northwest, the Roman Republic had become the dominant power of the Mediterranean world. Its armies had conquered vast territories. Its political influence reached nearly every neighboring kingdom. Egypt remained wealthy, but its future increasingly depended upon maintaining careful relationships with Rome. Cleopatra understood this better than anyone. She was not simply a queen. She was a skilled diplomat. She knew that intelligence could sometimes achieve what armies could not. One of the most famous moments in her life came during her meeting with Julius Caesar. According to later ancient accounts, Cleopatra secretly entered the royal palace where Caesar was staying, avoiding her political enemies. Whether wrapped inside a carpet, hidden in bedding, or brought in another concealed manner remains uncertain, as ancient sources differ. Whatever the exact method, the meeting changed history. Caesar was deeply impressed by her confidence, intelligence, and political skill. An alliance soon followed. With Roman support, Cleopatra strengthened her position upon the Egyptian throne. Later, after Caesar's death, another important alliance emerged, this time with Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful leaders. Together, they dreamed of preserving Egypt's independence while reshaping the balance of power across the eastern Mediterranean. For several years, their partnership appeared strong. But events in Rome moved rapidly. Another ambitious leader, Octavian, challenged Antony for control of the Roman world. The growing rivalry eventually led to one decisive confrontation, the Battle of Actium. In 31 BCE, enormous fleets gathered off the western coast of Greece.
Warships filled the sea. Thousands of sailors prepared for battle. As the fighting unfolded, Octavian's forces gradually gained the advantage. Antony and Cleopatra escaped with part of their fleet, returning to Egypt. But the outcome had already been decided. The following year, Roman forces entered Alexandria. Facing certain defeat, Antony died. Soon afterward, Cleopatra also took her own life. The exact circumstances remain uncertain. Ancient tradition tells the famous story of an asp delivering a fatal bite. Modern historians continue to debate whether poison, a snake, or another method was responsible. What is beyond doubt is that her death marked the end of an era. With Cleopatra gone, Egypt ceased to exist as an independent kingdom.
It became a province of the expanding Roman Empire. The long age of the pharaohs had finally come to an end.
Yet Egypt itself endured. The Nile continued its eternal journey toward the sea. The pyramids remained standing beneath the desert sun. The temples continued to inspire travelers from distant lands. And the civilization that had flourished for thousands of years left a legacy that would influence architecture, mathematics, engineering, art, religion, and human imagination for centuries to come. As the final light of day fades across the Giza plateau, the Great Pyramid glows softly beneath the evening sky. The same stars that watched over the first pharaohs now shine above the silent desert once again. Kingdoms have risen, empires have fallen, but ancient Egypt still whispers its story to everyone willing to listen. And tonight, as sleep gently arrives, its timeless journey quietly comes to an end.
Thank you for spending this peaceful journey with Mystery Sleep. From the first villages along the Nile to the rise of mighty pharaohs, from the towering pyramids of Giza to the reign of Cleopatra, we have traveled across more than 3,000 years of one of history's greatest civilizations. The stones of Egypt have witnessed countless generations. They have watched kings rise and kingdoms fall. Yet the gentle rhythm of the Nile has never stopped flowing. Even today, beneath the warm desert sun and the endless stars, the pyramids still stand in quiet silence, reminding us that while time changes everything, some stories are truly timeless. As your thoughts begin to slow, allow the peaceful waters of the Nile to drift gently through your mind. Imagine a soft evening breeze moving across the ancient temples.
Hear the distant sound of the river. Feel the warmth of the fading desert sun giving way to the cool embrace of night. There is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to remember.
Simply rest. Let every breath become slower, every thought become quieter, and every moment carry you deeper into peaceful sleep. Thank you for joining Mystery Sleep. If you enjoyed this relaxing journey through history, you are warmly invited to subscribe and return for more peaceful stories from the ancient world. Until our next adventure, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the timeless wonders of history.